Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a brilliantly grim, dark Gothic fable. We are going to unpack some seriously profound philosophy about the nature of the self, the illusion of control, and honestly, the terrifying cost of trying to completely eradicate chaos from our lives. We'll be exploring a world defined by shadows and illusions, leaning heavily on some potent ideas from thinkers like Fichte and Nietzsche. It's going to be a wild ride, so let's get into it. So we begin our narrative right here, literally in the shadows. We have this figure known as the bound puppeteer, and he's speaking from the depths of the trap he actually built himself. He offers this incredibly profound confession of just pure exhaustion, saying, "I am no longer the creator of my own theater. I have become a vessel for a resentment far older than my own." You see, he tried to cut the cords of friction in his life to get absolute command. But instead of freedom, he achieved a sort of spiritual suicide. By eliminating all resistance, his individual essence just completely dissolved.
And tragically, this brings us to his current state, a silent, lightless cage. This puppeteer sought total control, but ended up assimilated into a sterile, singular narrative that he didn't even write. He became a figure of decadence, pulled along by a shadow that absolutely could not tolerate shifting perspectives. He realizes, way too late, that truth actually lives in the friction of the many. It definitely does not exist in the hollow silence of the one. He's at a point where he can no longer even feel his own limbs, all because he wiped out the very friction that gave his existence meaning in the first place.
Parables of the Apollonian Illusion.
Now, to really grasp this cultural castration, we first need to define the Apollonian illusion. Think of this as the destruction of organic, wild, life-affirming myths, which get replaced by this incredibly rigid, artificial order. It's this grand delusion of seamless order that acts as a mask. Underneath, it's just a silent graveyard. It's total control, but it's bought at the ultimate price of life and vitality. Let's watch how this illusion builds up through the actions of a weak-willed king across 4 distinct parables. In stage 1, the painted stone, the king is so terrified of tangled, natural growth that he actually replaces living flowers with painted rocks, completely starving the soil. Then in stage 2, the paved garden, he literally paves over blooming fields because he just can't handle their multiplicity. Moving to stage 3, the frozen mirror, a weaver freezes his tapestry into a single image, flattening history out of pure fear. And finally, stage 4, the seamless shroud. Here, the monarch completely demonizes his peers to enforce a singular, incredibly sterile narrative. So, what is this king actually waging war against? Well, it's the Dionysian reality. That is the beautiful, chaotic, and totally fragmented tapestry of existence. When he paves his garden, the sovereign looks at this blooming individuality and literally brands it heresy. And why? Because his weak will simply cannot bear the massive weight of multiplicity. The vibrant reality of life is just too much for him, so he performs this cultural castration, flattening everything into dead stone and absurdly mistaking that death for divine perfection. The end result of all this is an Apollonian mask hiding a forced vacuum. To establish what he thinks is supreme truth, the monarch replaces a pluralistic past with a seamless shroud, turning his divine neighbors into these monstrous abominations. But listen, this isn't strength, not at all. It's a beautifully painted mask designed to hide a really pathetic reality. The king is simply too weak to live alongside anything he doesn't personally own and control. And this leaves us with a massive, profound question. What actually happens to the self when all external limits, all dissenting voices, and all friction are just completely destroyed? Like, what is the true ultimate cost of this cowardly erasure of boundaries?
The Daemon's Dark Diagnosis.
Enter the truth-telling demon. He arrives to just completely shatter the king's illusion. And he grounds his critique in Johann Gottlieb Fichte's concept of the absolute I. Now, the absolute I is the core self, but here is the terrifying catch. It can only achieve true self-awareness by encountering and striving against an external limit. It literally requires an opposing boundary to push against just to know it exists. Fichte called this external limit the not I. This interaction is absolutely crucial. You have the absolute I, the self-striving for awareness, and the not I, the external world and its necessary friction. The demon explains that true sovereignty actually requires this dynamic. By erasing the not I, by shattering those boundary stones and silencing the friction of truth, the king basically robbed his own absolute I of the very thing it needs to survive.
Without the external world pushing back, the self doesn't conquer, it just dissolves.
The demon's verdict here is merciless. He looks at the king and says, "By destroying the not I, you haven't conquered the world at all. No, you've merely retreated into an empty room. You sit there, a puppet king, dancing on the strings of your own deep insecurity. You thought you were creating perfect sovereignty, but actually, scratch that. You just manufactured a forced vacuum because you were terrified to lead a world that blooms with multiplicity."
Monarchy as slave morality. The demon then reveals that the king's reign is entirely built on Nietzschean slave morality. It's an empire built on exhaustion. It basically operates in 3 steps. First, the king fears the independent motion of others. Second, he cowardly erases these so-called evil of their independence. And third, he looks at the silent, dead vacuum he just created and slaps the label good on it. He has convinced himself of his own moral superiority simply because he eradicated anything that could ever challenge him.
Just consider the contrast here between delusion and reality. The king's delusion is a seamless past, an empty room, and this hollow silence that he calls perfection. The demon's reality, on the other hand, is the friction of truth, the beautiful multiplicity of life, a fragmented but deeply vibrant existence. True power isn't the cowardly erasure of the outside world. True power is the capacity to endure the beautiful Dionysian reality that the king was so desperately trying to castrate.
Ultimately, the demon leaves the king with a devastating realization. The king is merely a monument to exhaustion. He's ruling over a silence that has absolutely no context whatsoever. He mistook the total death of his world for absolute existence. By removing every single thing that wasn't him, he inadvertently rendered his own existence entirely meaningless. Which brings us right back to our own lives. When we seek control, comfort, or order, we really have to ask ourselves, are we embracing the necessary friction of the not I? Are we striving against the limits of the world to build true self-awareness? Or are we, kind of like the puppet king, terrified of the chaos, slowly building our own silent cages and retreating into an empty room? Beware the illusion of perfect order, guys. It might just be the sound of your own spiritual suicide. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.